Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. In my last video, I shared playing around with Simon Hurley's solar paste, and I had an idea of something that I wanted to do based on the excess that was outside of the paper. So what I'm going to do is take each one of these colors, smear them all together on my Tim Holtz media surface mat, and then I'm going to put some die cut butterflies in it and let it completely dry. So the idea is that this stuff, when it is dry, it's almost plasticky and it's transparent and also iridescent. So I thought it would make really pretty wings, fairy wings, butterfly wings. I don't happen to have any fairy wing dies, so I decided to play around and try it with these detailed butterfly dies, and it works perfectly. So I have 4 different butterflies die cut. I've got one of each of the same color as the paste. So I've got a blue one, a purple one, a pink one, and a green one. I chose to do dark shades of each of these colors because I didn't really want light shades and have them competing with the paste. I'm taking my Sizzix die pick and I'm just poking the different parts of that butterfly die cut. I want to make sure that it has good contact with the paste, especially around the wing area, because I don't want it to lift up and not stick to it. So I'm going to leave that there. I just left it overnight. I don't really know how long it took for it to dry, but I figured overnight was good. I knew it would be definitely dry by then. And I'm just going to lift them off. It peels off the media mat really nice and easily. And then I'm just using my cutter bee scissors and I'm cutting around it. Now I'm not being super careful. I'm making sure that every little bit of that paste from the outside is cut off. There's a little bit there if you look at my cards, my finished cards really closely, but it's not really very noticeable. So I'm just being as close as possible without getting too nitpicky. So I'm showing you this first one. The other 2 I will do off screen just because there's no difference between cutting them and cutting these ones. It cut really nice and easy and nice and smoothly. And I really liked the sheer iridescence it gave those wings. I also used the glass media mat scraper to clean off any excess paste before continuing on with my next part of the project. For the background of these cards, I'm using this Flower Frenzy 3D embossing card or embossing folder from Spellbinders. It's a really pretty 3D floral print, just as it does an all over background print. And I thought I'd like to do a slimline card. Now I'm going to do 2 different backgrounds. At this point, I thought I was only going to choose one, but I ended up choosing both and making 2 cards because I had the 4 butterflies and really an even number doesn't look nice on one card. I figured I'd do 1 card with 1 and then the other ones with 3. So I misted my paper. I'm putting it through my Big Shot machine. I like to put the top tab open and then I have a shim with some cardstock to make the right settings or the right thickness for the sandwich for my Big Shot machine. Putting it back and forth just to make sure that it's nice and pressed into that folder. And when I open it up, it creates a really beautiful background that I think will be lovely for these butterflies. I'm going to do the same thing with my second background, but I thought I would ink my background or ink the embossing folder before embossing it. I wasn't sure if I wanted a completely white background for this or if I wanted to have some color. So for this one, I'm just using some green. It's going to go on the background and not go on the flowers. I'm using Bundled Sage Distress Oxide for this. It's just going to create some color in the background. It is going to be a little bit blotchy because this is a brand new embossing folder. I haven't used it for this, and I find the Spellbinders embossing folders don't take the ink quite as smoothly as some of the other ones, but I knew it was going to be a little bit blotchy and I'm totally fine with it. If necessary, I could have inked the embossing folder again and redone it a second time just to get some more ink on there, but I just wanted the color. I wasn't concerned with it being completely solid. In my mind, this is kind of a grassy or the greenery from the flowers, and it's never all one shade anyways. So once that is done, I'm going to put both of those backgrounds aside. I'm going to let them dry completely before continuing on. I'm not going to leave these backgrounds like this. I want to take some of that solar paste and I want to put a little bit on the flowers and the leaves just to kind of tie the iridescence in between the butterflies and the background. Now on the light background, this is going to show up just as a really pale iridescent, and you're really only going to see it when you tilt it in the light. It's not obvious color, and I love that about these solar pastes. It shows up differently on lighter cardstock than darker cardstock. If you haven't seen my previous video, I show both light backgrounds and dark backgrounds in a bunch of different ways, and I'll link to that video at the end of this one, because it's really fascinating how this just shows up differently on different backgrounds. So I'm just doing different colors for the flowers, and then I will get to a point where I will use it on the leaves. It's really hard to only stay on the top of the raised part of this background, so I am getting a little bit on the recessed part of this background, but it's okay. It still looks really pretty. And really at the end, when you see the cards, the focal point is the butterflies, not as much the backgrounds. So it's just a little bit of a way to tie it in. Once my florals were done, I went to put the green paste on the leaves, and because they're so tiny, it was really hard to get in there. So I just took a brush and just lightly brushed them. Once again, I'm not trying to get all over color, just a little bit here and there. And the solar paste doesn't take very, very long to dry either. Like, I want to say seconds. It's pretty much dry by the time you've finished putting it on. So once those are dry, I'm going to cut them down to create my cards. For the one with the green background, I'm going to do just a regular A2 4¼ by 5½ inch card. And for the other background, I'm going to do a slim line that is 3½ inches by 6½ inches. So those are the sizes for my card bases. I'm going to cut the pieces a little bit smaller so that I have can put a little bit of a mat around them. Once my card bases are cut, I'm using my Teflon bone folder in my score pal, and I'm scoring my cardstock. I like to use my Teflon bone folder because it doesn't reshape when I'm using it with cardstock. I find that the tool that comes with the score pal, because it's plastic, it tends to start to bend and mold a little bit. It changes shape while you're using it. And by using the Teflon one, I never have issues with that. It always has stayed the same shape. I like the fact that it has a flat end on one side and then a pointier end on the other side. So you can really burnish that crease in place. Once all my pieces are done, I'm using my Distress Collage medium to glue everything together. As I've said before, I love the Distress Collage medium because it dries completely matte and it also dries clear. So if anything happens to be sticking out or seeping out, you're never going to see that it was there. I also find with liquid glue, especially with 3D embossing folder backgrounds, you can just get it in better areas to get a better stick. You can put it on any of the recessed areas that are going to be touching the cards, and you just have a little bit more control than, say, a double-sided tape. I like to put an acrylic block on my pieces while I am adding glue to the next piece, just to hold things in place and free up my hands to be able to do that. With the 3D backgrounds, I do wait a little bit longer to make sure that those are completely dry before I go and add my butterflies to it. I find if you don't wait for that to dry, then sometimes when you glue embellishments on the front, it isn't held in place quite enough in order to get a nice clean adhesion. So once those backgrounds are glued down and dried, I'm just going to use that same Distress Collage medium and glue on my butterflies. I'm just putting the pink one on the green background, and then the other three are going to go on my slimline card. I kind of thought the pink one looked a little bit out of place with the other two, so it just worked out better this way. I'm only putting the glue on the body part of the butterfly. I want those wings to pop up so that you can see a little bit through them and you can see the transparency and the iridescence of them. I left the slimline one without a sentiment on the front of the card. There wasn't really much space for it, and I figured I could always put one on the inside of the card when I go to use it. On the A2 card with the pink butterfly, I am going to put a sentiment on there. I have a little container with tiny sentiments that I've already pre-made. One is just silver embossed on white cardstock, so it works perfectly for the card, but it's not going to be too distracting and take away from the opalescence of the lunar paste on the front of the card. It just fit really, really well. I often like to put those tiny sentiments on pop dots or whatever, pop them up, but because there's so much texture on the background from the 3D embossing folder, I decided to just glue it down flat, and it works perfectly like that. Between the 3D embossing folder and the butterflies, there's enough texture there. And here are the completed cards. I love how that solar paste has just a subtle iridescence to it with this lighter background, and they worked perfectly for those wings. I really love the transparency and the sheerness of them. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a fabulous day.